not a shame.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the DFS Army Fantasy Football Show. I'm here with my guy, Flex Matt. I'm, of course, Flex Shane. All of our content can be found over at dfsarmy.com. Fantastic website. Of course, we are the niche site, Matthew, talking anything and everything that is related to fantasy football. And guess what, Matt? We are less than 1 week away from the NFL draft. This is where dreams are made. Dreams are shattered. CJ Stroud, no longer the 101. What's going on, brother?
Yes. Hey, good morning. Welcome back to the, to us. And I appreciate you having me back on. We are 1 week away, and it seems like, yes, there has been a little bit of what you would call a sliding scale, I think, from the very beginning of when people were kind of, just tapping into right now. I think a lot of people have a lot more definitive hype, I guess you can say, where others have fallen off. CJ Stroud being one of them. And I would say that you have some things to say about CJ, but I do too. So why don't you go ahead and start with that? The quarterbacks seem to be at the top of this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here. Might as well start with them. It's easy enough, huh?
Listen, okay, so the storyline pretty much for the last month and a half, 2 months, really following the combine, has been who are the Carolina Panthers going to be taking at 101. And forever it was CJ Stroud. And now for the last couple weeks, I would say the betting odds have now favored to Bryce Young, which frankly I don't necessarily agree with. Right, when you look at just a prototypical type of quarterback, it's more CJ Stroud, right, or even like a Will Levis type body type. But a lot of these, what is it, the S2 scores, CJ Stroud, which is essentially it's a test that these players take, and it's a cognitive recognition, right? So it's an idea that these players are able to react in live time, right? Bryce Young was something like a 90th, 93rd percentile. CJ Stroud was significantly lower. I don't have it in front of me, but less than 20th percentile, right, in terms of his score. So that's one data point, right, that these teams are looking at. The thing is, Matt, like, what's changed in the last 3 or 4 weeks? I mean, there's this slander out there about CJ Stroud's character now, right? About how he just completely ghosted the Mannings. Like, I just don't see that happening, right? So there's all this information out there. And here's the reality, Matt. Okay. When these quote experts are doing their big boards, a score of like 10 out of 32 in terms of choosing the right player to the right team is like exceptional. So the reality is nobody knows what the F is going to happen. So we can just speculate. But I still think from an NFL perspective, when I close my eyes and see range of outcomes, who's going to be in the league 5 years being productive, to me, it's CJ Stroud. So I like Bryce Young. From a character perspective, amazing. But it's interesting. So to bring it around to fantasy football, Matt, let's assume Bryce Young goes 101, okay? The Houston Texans take CJ Stroud, and then the Indianapolis Colts, who apparently are very, very high on your guy, Will Levis. Let's say those three players go to those three locations. How would you rank your rookie drafts for those quarterbacks? Who would you be taking first?
Well, I think it matters where Anthony Richardson goes, because because 1, 2, 3, you know what I mean? Just because 1, 2, 3 happens in that order doesn't mean, you know what I mean? And originally when we had theorized this podcast and what we were going to talk about, we're going to talk about landing spots and what I like or where we could see guys land and fall. And obviously, I'm from Seattle. You're from the Pacific Northwest area, or at least within 1 hour difference of the time zone. And so I was just sitting at 5 and being a Seahawks fan, and I understand like all the everything that's going on at 5 and what we could do or what we should do, or what I just look at if I was faced with this, because just understanding that, let's say Will Levis didn't go off at 3, or even, okay, let's say he did and Anthony Richardson's there. If either of those quarterbacks are there, this morning when I just went through my finalizations of everything, I just selected the quarterback at 5. There's a lot of talk, a lot of mocks that Seattle doesn't need to do that. We can go, we get the interior defensive lineman or hopefully an outside defensive lineman. But I just think that the Seahawks may never get another chance again to be top 5. They may never get another chance again at a Will Levis or an Anthony Richardson. Which, if you really look into a lot of what the fantasy industry is talking about is, if we're going to swing for the fences, then we're not going to draft Bryce Young or, in fantasy football teams, because sure, that's consistency, but on the top side, Will Levis could be the guy, the Josh Allen. Anthony Richardson can be the Jalen Hurts. So in fantasy football, I want those guys. So I'm thinking, okay, well, why wouldn't the Seattle Seahawks want to draft for upside themselves for their franchise as well? Never potentially being in the top 5 again. We got this pick from a trade. Who knows if we'll ever be top 5 again? And then if we let it go and watch, Anthony Richardson become Cam Newton and we watch Will Levis become Josh Allen, then it would really suck. So I just think I'm in the war room. I'm going to go QB at 5 to Seattle. And that's the QB I want. If it's Anthony Richardson or it's Will Levis, that's what I want. If it's CJ Stroud, I don't know that I would pick CJ Stroud 1. Still in that situation. So I guess to answer your question, I would go Will Levis number 1, CJ Bryce 3 in that situation, not knowing where Anthony Richardson went. But if Anthony Richardson goes number 1, I think that's the real.
That won't happen. That won't happen. Okay.
Why won't it happen?
Anthony Richardson?
Why
number 1 overall?
Why won't Anthony Richardson go number 1?
Because when you talk about a pure NFL quarterback, I mean, we know athleticism is an important data point, but it's not the be-all, end-all data point, right? When you talk about somebody that can command an offense in the NFL, I mean, hell, Anthony Richardson didn't have a above 500 record in college football, right? The guy's played, 13 games? So if the Carolina Panthers were going to trade up to number 1 and spend all that draft capital, don't you think they want a player that can start today and is prepared to run that locker room today?
What is this, Michael Dickinson? What is this slander? Okay.
Slander. Hey, okay. I have another hypothetical for you, Matt. Okay. Talking about your Seattle Seahawks, because they have been one of those teams that has been said they could take a quarterback, right? Geno Smith has been fantastic, but how do we know that last year wasn't just an outlier year for him, right? Because he hasn't really done much else in his career. Hendon Hooker, the journeyman, he's 25 years old. The Seattle Seahawks have the 5th pick and they have the 20th pick. Hendon Hooker realistically could fall to 20. He's not ready to play because I believe it was an ACL that he tore late in the season last year. But next year, he could be a legitimate starter, learns behind a veteran like Geno Smith. Doesn't that seem a lot more realistic? Then they can go and get who some are saying is one of the best players in the draft, the Jalen Carter. Character issues is falling. Like, doesn't that make more sense for your team?
Yes. I mean, obviously it makes more sense, right? But again, I look at you talk about Anthony Richardson, we are giving the people what they want. Here's the reality with the Panthers is they went to the combine. Yeah. After the combine, they went ahead and traded away a premier asset at receiver and some picks to get up to number 1. So you either have to imagine that they really didn't like what they seen at the combine and that steadfast them right into Bryce Young, or they loved what they saw at the combine with Will Levis or Anthony Richardson and went up, or CJ, and traded to go up there. Now, the answer to your question is Hendon Hooker. Some had theorized that Hendon Hooker could be drafted at 5 to Seattle.
That's true.
I mean,
yeah.
Some had said that. So it's not crazy. It's not super crazy to think that. It's just as much not crazy to think that Anthony Richardson could go 1 overall. I really don't think that that's that crazy, especially, you want a guy that can start right away, maybe. But what if you actually want a guy that just sells tickets and makes your freaking Carolina Panthers team hot again? And the guy's running all over the place, and maybe you're scoring 34 points a game and you're looking good doing it, but you're still losing. Like, I don't know. What's better, selling tickets or winning games? Because if you have a hot asset, come on.
Bryce Young is electric. People love Bryce Young. Amazing personality.
Also, people hate Bryce Young, too. I mean, I don't know.
I guess. I
He's
mean,
not
yeah,
sexy. He's not sexy. Anthony Richardson's the Lamborghini. The guy's pulling out the garage.
Yeah, and maybe like the regional politics, maybe they don't love an Alabama quarterback, right? That's also very possible too. That can be baked into the equation. So the one thing, and because there's so many other skill position players I want to talk to you about from the fantasy football perspective, but my one question to you, Matt, is whenever a player doesn't start immediately, there's always risk and there's always question marks. Just see a player like Trey Lance and how that saga has gone, right? Nobody could have predicted it, but it's happened, right? Does something like that give you any pause? If let's say Anthony Richardson in your hypothetical world goes 101 to the Carolina Panthers, they don't plan to start him day one, right? Because he's not quite ready. But next year, they have a superstar in their hands. Are you comfortable drafting Anthony Richardson at the 101, or let's call it 102 after Bijan in our rookie drafts, knowing that there's an uncertainty, knowing you're not going to get that immediate payout in year one because you think Anthony Richardson's going to have to sit, and there's always risk. Shit happens. It's the NFL, man. There's a Brock Purdy's of the world. Mr. Irrelevance can come in, and the hubris of coaches can start those players over super athletes like a Trey Lance, like an Anthony Richardson. Would you put your nuts on the table and take Anthony Richardson at 102 after Bijan?
Yes.
Boom, done. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Matthew
Yes.
back. Not afraid to be bold. Okay.
Yes. My nuts are
nuts.
on the table. I have oversized nuts with this. Okay.
Oh God. Okay. This is going off the rails. Actually, 11 minutes in, that's not bad. Usually it's a lot earlier than that, Matt.
There we go. It's a record.
There we go. Okay. Let's talk about some of these wide receivers, man, because to me, this is a very okay. So running back, there's sizzle at the top and then a lot of depth, right? But the wide receiver class, it's generally being viewed as a lesser class versus the most recent seasons. I mean, frankly, we've been spoiled, man. Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jahan Dotson's like we've been spoiled, right? This class, a little bit more even tempered, but a player who's getting a lot of buzz and has been mocked by a lot of different, quote, again, experts as being the number one wide receiver off the board is Zay Flowers. Now, if Kansas City, because, hey, guess what? He's been thrown with Patrick Mahomes, man. I'm not sure if you heard. Twitter kind of, exploded about this whole situation. Would Zay Flowers be a good fit in Kansas City? And do you think realistically
that's like the worst question ever? Is any wide receiver a good fit in Kansas City?
Well, we thought Sky Moore was.
He still is. That doesn't mean he's not. Just that's the same kind of thing. So what do you care more about, a quarterback that doesn't that doesn't play for a year? Would you still draft a 102, or Sky Moore, who's on an electric offense, who did play that first year, just didn't look great? So it's like, well, then the real answer is go buy Sky Moore, because his potential could skyrocket, and he's probably really cheap right now. But I just quickly want to answer your Hendon Hooker question from before. Yeah. Yes, it is a smarter play to just go grab Hendon Hooker where you could, and not have to draft him in top 5 or early. But Zay Flowers, so yes, obviously Kansas City, he's likely going to be gone before you get to Kansas City. Kansas City sitting at the end of the draft, obviously. Those.
Well, I mean, so Kansas City, obviously, at the end of the draft, a team that, when we were doing our depth charts, has a glaring need for wide receiver is the New York Giants. They pick at 25. Like, that could be a nice little sweet spot for Zay Flowers as well.
There's so many sweet spots, or not sweet spots, so many spots a wide receiver could go. I mean, you've seen him to Houston, to Tennessee, to Seattle, to the Chargers, to the Ravens, to the Giants. There's a lot of opportunity. That's why you've seen so many people say, hey, you could turn around and have 3, 4, 5 of these guys go in the first round, depending on what the team's like. So that's kind of why, when you're talking about, guys like Jonathan Mingo, where they're moving up boards, well, that's because size is not found at the top of this draft board here, which is why guys like Zay Flowers have skyrocketed. Not skyrocketed, I guess, from the idea that Zay Flowers was probably 4, 5, or 6. Now he's potentially up to 1, which I think is a harder skyrocket than a guy from 25 or whatever, like Mingo, up to 5 or 6. It's size. And that's why Zay Flowers is going up, because he's over 180 pounds. And then you have
Yeah.
Jordan Addison, who is under 180 pounds. And obviously you'd have to squint your eyes a little bit harder to see somebody like Jordan Addison. But I really like Zay Flowers. I think Zay Flowers can go pretty much anywhere in this draft and probably be successful. Everybody talks about how he looks like another Tyler Lockett, and
Yep.
I agree 100%, because he's a small guy. Just because he's 183 pounds or whatever he is
182.
doesn't mean he doesn't really look like he's small out there too. The difference is he can win outside. Jordan Addison can too. So I look at him like they're both pretty much the same guy to me. I know that Addison's a little more slender, but if you watch Steve Smith's 36-minute breakdown of the wide receivers, he basically couldn't talk about Addison because there's not really a weakness in Addison's game outside of the fact that he's undersized with the weight. But, Devontae Smith, guys like that have proven that we're probably trending lighter on the receiver side anyway. And you don't get these super large corners per the regular norm either anymore. Not saying they're not out there, but again, speed versus speed is where we're at right now in today's NFL.
If you drafted Jordan Addison and you got a production of say a Deontay Johnson, you'd be happy with that, right? In the first round, when you look at he's just an absolute target magnet.
Yeah. But obviously it takes the right QB to get him in there, and that's kind of why I like the fit to the Chargers in the first round, because Justin Herbert is great. They don't need somebody to play outside, so now you have just a weapon that you can put anywhere. So what are you going to do? Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, or Jordan Addison, and then maybe they get a Darnell Washington in the second round or something like that, or even these tight ends are deep. You can get Sam Laporta, you can get Will Mallory, you can go down the line with these tight ends, cunts, and say, hey, now you're gonna have to cover all over the field. That's something to say. I think Zay Flowers very well could be the first wide receiver off the board. Sure.
And I think too, you mentioned the Chargers, they're picking at 21. So again, it's right around that sweet spot, right? We can see, just looking at last year, right? I think the general consensus is Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jameson Williams, who, rest in peace, his first 6 games of the season. They were probably superior prospects going into last year, right? And that's not just hindsight bias. I think that's a fact, right? So we'll probably see these wide receivers fall relative to previous years, and that 15 to 20 seems like a really good sweet spot, because the strength of this draft, I would say, is on the defensive side of the ball, and the teams that are picking early have a lot of needs. So Zay Flowers, Jackson Smith and Jigba, even Quentin Johnson, right? He's one of the, I would say he's probably the highest end larger wide receiver. Any of these guys could go between 15 and 25, and nobody would be surprised. So I love that idea of maybe like a Jordan Addison or even a Zay Flowers going at pick 21 to the Chargers. Now,
what's really crazy is that we've gotten to the point where everybody has talked so much about Bijan and Jackson Smith and Jigba that you almost don't even want to talk about them anymore, because it's obviously I don't think Zay Flowers, if I gun to my head, Zay Flowers isn't going first wide receiver overall, but you can theorize that it's possible. Somebody could fall in love with but no. Jackson Smith and Jigba is going to be the first wide receiver off the board. Bijan Robinson is going to be the first running back, first overall pick. I've seen some people go Jackson Smith and Jigba in a super flex number 2 overall, and that's not that's not spicy right now. It's not spicy. If you don't love Bryce Young and you're thinking, well, these quarterbacks have some downsides to where, man, Jackson's probably got no downside at all. Doesn't matter where he's going to go. He's going to fit in. He can be a top 20-ish wide receiver with any given week of 18 to 22 points. I mean, I'll take that versus a middling QB or one that may never see the field. Somehow, I don't know.
Matt, if you're an NFL team, okay, would you rather spend first round draft capital on Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers, or wait until round 2 where a player like Josh Downs out of North Carolina is being projected? Now, from a size perspective, Josh Downs is 171 pounds. Jordan Addison is 173 pounds, right? So from a just, pure body type, similar players. I prefer Jordan Addison, obviously, but you're probably going to have to pay first round draft capital. Would you be just as happy with the Josh Downs in round 2 if you're an NFL team? Or do you think there's just not enough upside there?
No, that's not it. He can't play. He's not going to play outside. So would I be fine? Sure. If my team only needed a very specific player and you're going to play him in one area. So like when we had talked about this podcast and what, landing spots, I think Josh Downs, if you put him in Buffalo, that's the only place where I can look at him and say he's going to go 110 or like 111 because Isaiah McKenzie, because, Cole Beasley, like they're looking for that guy. And they feed that guy if that guy's open, and there's a lot of opportunity there. So I love that.
So what you're saying, Matt, is that rest in peace, all my Khalil Shakir best ball shares thus far.
It's just, I mean, not necessarily. I would say that it's more Gabe Davis shares that are going to be the ones that are always on the fence, because I mean, again, if he's not going to be able to get open and Josh Downs or Tank Dell or Jaden Reed go to Buffalo and they are always open, then he's just going to decoy all the time.
Well, let's talk about Buffalo for a second, right? Because there's certain teams like the Chargers, like the Chiefs, like the Buffalo Bills, where if any one of these wide receivers falls on the team, immediately they get skyrocketed based on situation, right? So they've got the 27th pick, they've got the 59th pick, and they've got the 91st pick, right? So they effectively have all their picks in rounds 1 to 3. So the first couple days, they really easily could take a wide receiver, because when you look at their depth chart, Gabe Davis just isn't it, right? By the way, we play in too many damn smart dynasty leagues, Matt. I could not sell Gabe Davis for a song before at the start of last season. People want like yeah, I'll give you a third for this guy. It's like, so, respect to our dynasty teams, but also it totally sucks when you compare it to the rest of the industry. But you look at players that are a little bit deeper on the wide receiver big board, and I'm looking at a player like maybe like a Cedric Tillman or a Jaden Reed or like a Rashee Rice, somebody that isn't really, that would be more complementary to a Stephon Diggs, right? Like I'm trying to think about what Stephon Diggs does well, and he does finish everything well. They have a player like Khalil Shakir in the slot. I liked Shakir last year. I think you did too. So I think they don't really have a need at the slot, but it's really that second Z wide receiver, the two to go alongside in the 2 wide receiver sets. I mean, does any of those players stand out to you? Like Cedric Tillman out of Tennessee. I mean, I know you would like Jalen Hyatt, but Cedric Tillman's getting a lot of buzz too. Do you think that would be a decent fit potentially at Buffalo? And if yes, where would you draft him in your dynasty rookie drafts?
Well, so I think that any wide receiver is a great fit in Buffalo. It doesn't matter what they're doing and who they're drafting. The reality is that Michael Wilson is going to go in the 3rd round. That's what a lot of people talk about, is that you can pretty much guarantee and book that Michael Wilson's going in the 3rd round. If Michael Wilson ends up on the Bills, then Gabe Davis is gone, or like he disappears and Shakir will stay the guy. If you flip the size reversal and you go to like a Tyler Scott or, Downs like we talked about, right? And then all of a sudden Shakir's probably on the side out. Marvin Mims is probably the guy that a team like Buffalo would probably really love, because I think Marvin Mims can play both sides, which is fine. And that's the guy I'd probably be more scared about in the 3rd round. Marvin Mims could be in the 2nd round.
Yeah, Marvin Mims is fantastic just because, I mean, this is the guy that plays a lot of special teams, so he's just super agile with the ball in his hand. But can we just talk about Michael Wilson for a second? Because you brought up the name, and I think the casual fantasy football fan might not know exactly who this guy is, but so he's a wide receiver at Stanford, and the reason he's getting a lot of buzz is because he performed very, very well at the Senior Bowl, which, as we know, over the last probably, I would say, 5 years, Matt, players who perform well at the Senior Bowl have really started to get more and more notoriety, and I think the NFL is starting to value those types of exercises, those types of, I guess we can call it an event. For those who aren't familiar with what the Senior Bowl is, it's a week long. Call it practice week, followed by a game down in Mobile, Alabama, where all the seniors, or a number of high-profile seniors, are invited by Jim Nagy, who manages it, and it's an actual NFL coach who coaches each of the teams, right? So, Michael Wilson was one of these standout players, and he's interesting to me. Again, another larger body type player, and he's a strong player with the ball in his hand. I think he'd be a good compliment. I think that's really, really sharp, Matt, as like a third round pick to the Buffalo Bills, or even a fourth. That's a really sharp pick. I like that one.
Yeah, the other place that I'd really like to see is Cincinnati, because the thing about Cincinnati is they've proven with a number 3 that isn't necessarily small. Like Tyler Boyd is not small, so you get 3 decent sized guys that can win all over the field. So I think that would be a good spot, a great landing spot. It's kind of funny because of the depth in this class. Typically you would look at the end of the first round as non-opportunistic, to grab guys that will actually plug and play. But this year, I think that you can go all the way into the 5th round with plug and play guys that will turn around and fit into your system. Marvin Mims, I liked him better than Zay Flowers when I was looking.
Wow.
When I was watching, I did. So Caleb Williams and him played together before Caleb went. After Caleb left, he had a better season. So Marvin Mims is just a guy that he can play. He can play. He's fast. He runs great routes. He's very much like Zay Flowers, where they're not extra large, but they can play outside and they can win outside. They play bigger than they are. And another guy's Jaden Reed. Jaden Reed it is bigger, so that's great. But now you're hearing that he might go in the 2nd round, and to Seattle in the early 2nd round, where you didn't. Let's say you passed up on receiver at 5 and 20. Well, you would at 5, but you pass up a receiver at 20, which they're not going to do if Jackson's there. But let's say they pass on Addison, or they pass on Zay Flowers, and they grab Jaden Reed in the 2nd round. I think that could be great. And I mentioned before, with respect to receivers, anybody that the Cowboys grab in the 3rd, 4th, or 5th round, Trey Palmer, like you said, a Cedric Tillman, a Xavier Hutchinson, who I really, really, really like. Like, I love Xavier Hutchinson. If I don't come out of my fantasy drafts, my rookie drafts with Xavier Hutchinson in every league, I'm going to be like super upset. And it's
talk about him for a sec. Talk about him, because I know we've talked about him a few times on the show. But for those who haven't seen previous shows, why do you like Xavier Hutchinson?
So the reason why I like him as much as I do is the exact reason why Jonathan Mingo is skyrocketing up boards right now. Is in a class with undersized guys, he's never been the one. Like, you never looked at him. So he's 6'2", 203. If you watch his tape, he really does win outside. He's not necessarily going to be your fastest guy, but with a 4.5, I mean 4.55 for a guy that's over 200 pounds is kind of where you want. My comp for him was like Michael Thomas, where he's like the guy that actually has pretty much everything that you're asking for, and he wins all over. But he's not Garrett Wilson. Like, he's not an Odell Beckham. Like, he's just not that guy. And a lot of people have typecast him as big slot, and that's all he's going to do. And I think that's I don't agree. Like, he's Jermaine Kearse to me. He's like a guy that he's just going to be put in and he's going to be open. Like, he's going to be open. You're not going to rub coverages his way. And I think he would be a great guy that you could get as a 3, which is why I really like the fit to the Dallas Cowboys with him. Like, I'm not going to worry about Xavier Hutchinson's opportunity when, okay, let's say you do typecast him in the slot and you have 2 good receivers already there, ones you've spent money on, which they just did. I love Xavier Hutchinson. I also like Parker Washington for the same kind of reason. Go ahead. Sorry.
Just real quick on Xavier Hutchinson. So for the people, right, out of Iowa State, last year, he had 163 targets, right? He had a 34.1% college target share. Like that's exceptional. That's exceptional. He had 107 targets for just under 1,200 yards and 6 receiving touchdowns. So fantastic. My question to you about the Dallas Cowboys, though, before we move on here. So are you saying like Brandon Cooks, he's like a 1-year rental, right? Like it's not really Michael Gallup. You don't buy, like, is it CD and then just a couple of guys?
Yeah,
think,
well, that's why I say it's like a 5th round thing, because it's like it's well, Xavier could go a lot earlier than that, but I just look at that as a sweet spot for Dallas, because then they don't worry about having to pop a guy right in there. But because of injuries, and then where I say injuries because Michael Gallup is, I wouldn't necessarily say he's injury prone, but he's just a guy that I just can't guarantee or count on. So when you look at a Jermaine Kearse, when you look at a guy that you can just pop in any situation and they're going to be good, and they're going to have an opportunity like a tight end, in the sense that you're going to run a guy down the seam, you're going to run a guy, you're just going to put him open. And because you have so much other guys on the field and other opportunities, it's going to leave it open. It's Tyler Boyd. It's
right. So it's one of these situations where if there is an injury and he becomes a 2 in that offense, there's definitive, like, he's going to be a DFS play that week.
Yeah. Okay. And he's gonna be a guy where I just look at, it's like he's gonna get touchdowns. Like, that's gonna be his thing. And I'm not gonna say it's a red zone thing. He's just gonna be available. He's just gonna be open. He wins. He's big. He's 6'2". He's thick, you know what I mean? He's not as thick as Jonathan Mingo. Now, Jonathan Mingo is 226, and the reason why you like Jonathan Mingo is because he comes from the thick receiver which is Ole Miss, the thickums. You're like the guys with the lats that'll nab your girlfriend up when you're walking right by him, which is why you like Jonathan Mingo. And he's fast, right? So he's fast. You can't teach speed. So that's why you like a guy like Jonathan Mingo, Tyree Wilson, right? So that's just defense. But just you get a guy with tangibles. Xavier isn't incredibly fast. And that's the same thing with Cedric Tillman, where they're not incredibly fast, but what are they? Well, if you move them outside, they can play outside and win. If you move them inside, they can create mismatches. If you're running them down the line, not like a Downs or a Tank Dell, they will have to shift coverages. If they don't, they're going to lose on the defensive side. So they're going to play almost like a move tight end or a big slot. And I get that, but they can play outside too. And that's why I like these guys. And hey, I'm going to tell you right now, 4th round, go and trade for 4th round rookie picks. Go and do it, especially in Superflex tight end premium leagues, which are going to move these tight ends up into the 3rd. 4th round is going to be where you can get guys like, it just depends on where Jaden Reed goes. He's probably a 3rd round pick, but I've seen Jalen Hyatt not go until the end of the 3rd recently in a mock.
No kidding. Yeah.
And I just think guys like Trey Palmer, Tyler Scott, you're going to grab these guys in the 4th round. You're going to be so happy that you did.
Can I just give a little tip for the people? Okay. So if you're in your rookie drafts, okay, and you're in round 2 and you're in like the middle of round 2 and there's any wide receiver with round 1 draft capital still available, I don't care if you love that player. I don't care if you hate that player. Draft that player, okay? Because you're going to get value on it, because 1st round wide receivers are going to get opportunity. Conversely, if you're in the 3rd round of your dynasty rookie drafts and there's a wide receiver still on the board with 2nd round draft capital, even if you hate him, Tyquan Thornton, for example, right? Those are the types of players you want to take shots on in round 3 of your rookie drafts. Cedric Tillman, you mentioned, is a player you want to take a shot on potentially. I'm not a big Cedric Tillman guy, right? I feel like the NFL is higher on Cedric Tillman than a lot of us fantasy players, just because we see, the advanced analytics, and for whatever reason, NFL still values size, right? Cedric Tillman, if he's available in round 3 of my rookie draft, probably going to get round 2 draft capital. It's a guy I want to take a shot on my team. So that's just a very simple formula where if you're kind of looking at just a bunch of names, go after the draft capital, right? At that stage of the draft. Do you agree with that, Matt? Is that a fair like oversimplification?
It is a fair oversimplification, but you also run yourself into kind of sometimes, I would say that second round is kind of also where teams will take shots on intangibles.
Yep.
So I forget, is it Rondale Moore is the biggest issue with this, and this is why Brandon Brandon Adam, his fantasy football takes are trash sometimes.
Stop. I love Rondale Moore.
I'm only saying that just so that
He's so good.
that I pick him in the side so that he comes on wanting to rant because of his trash takes on guys like Rondale Moore. But that's the thing, is like, okay, so you're gonna pick a guy like Tank Dell and you're gonna draft him in the second round, and then you're in the third round of your rookie pick and you're like, well, he got second round draft capital, but all he does is run down the field as a small guy. He's a decoy, and then he's also going to decoy you in your fantasy drafts. That's where I would pick running backs. That's where Podfather says this all the time. In the third round, we will probably transition to a running back with opportunity over these intangible draft capital wide receivers, but it's not like it's a bad play to go to wide receiver. In Dynasty, I would prefer to have a wide receiver over a running back, and I think that right now the league has completely shifted. Running backs are no longer as valuable in Dynasty right now unless you get one. And even when you have one, you get guys like, Dameon Pierce, where you really, if by chance Chase Brown ends up in Houston, Dameon Pierce is gone, done.
Well, he's hurt. His value is hurt. And just to go back to your point, man, I think that's super sharp, right? Like, from a fantasy football perspective, the reason I talk about these round 2 wide receivers is because there's just as many hits as there's misses, right? It's like a 50-50, roll the dice, hope for the best type pick. But at the running back position, you might not have, when you look at the end of the season in terms of total points scored, that round 2 wide receiver might have more total points, but you're not going to start that damn player any given week because they're only going to put up 7 to 12 points, PPR points, which isn't going to win you a week, right? Whereas those running backs, they might only have 75 points at the end of the season, but those 75 points may have come in 3 games, right? So that's why you're taking shots on them. And I think this is a great spot to pivot to the running back position, because when you look just objectively from a fantasy football perspective, there's a lot more running backs. Like, wide receivers, kind of the theme of small wide receiver. There's a lot more of those bigger running backs. And this could be kind of the changing of the guard, right? The Ezekiel Elliott's of the world, the Joe Mixons of the world, the Dalvin Cooks of the world, they're slowly being phased out of the NFL. This could be a new changing of the guard. So let's talk about the running back position. Bijan Robinson has been analyzed 8,000 times. Okay. So let's just assume Bijan Robinson is going to be the first running back off the board. Let's assume, even though NFL teams are getting smarter, he's probably still going to go around 1 just because that's what the talent dictates. Is there a player that you can see as the number 2 running back off the board? And is it Jahmyr Gibbs?
So number 2 in your fantasy drafts is what you're saying?
Well, number 2, I mean, look,
or in real NFL
running back position. Yeah, when we look at the running back position, draft capital really does matter for running backs in terms of opportunity. So in the real NFL, if Jahmyr Gibbs is being mocked as the second running back off the board, 1, is there a team that you see that would be a good fit for it? For Jahmyr Gibbs? And 2, where are you then going to be drafting him in our Superflex rookie drafts?
Yeah, so Jahmyr Gibbs is a conundrum for me because I don't like him. And I saw, or I heard, like, the smartest thing I've heard on Jahmyr Gibbs since I've been studying a little just for myself and for this podcast. But if Bijan Robinson was not here and not in the class, then I think Jahmyr would probably have a little bit more of a stronghold on the class, on the number 1 overall. But because he's not, and Bijan is so much the number one, then Jameer kind of does get just, your bridesmaid treatment where it's like, okay, he's number two. So I can understand it. Jameer would have to go to somewhere where I think he can get the lion's share, and a team would say, hey, you're our starting RB, and we're not going to deviate from that plan. You're the guy. So I would have to see something crazy for that to be, and then for me to even be involved in drafting him, to be honest. Now, the team that I would love for that to happen, now I'm just going to not be biased in the idea that in order for me to select him, so I would say a team like the Vikings trade Dalvin Cook, okay?
Or cut him.
Well, they're not going to cut him. I would just say that like they would keep him if not,
Okay.
you know what I mean? But I would say, let's say they trade Dalvin Cook for a second rounder, and then Jameer gets drafted there.
In that
and
spot,
then
yeah.
let's say the first pick they went Hendon Hooker, and then second pick they traded up for somebody and got Jameer, and they gave Dalvin away. So let's say it's like Carolina. Now, if Bryce Young goes number one, and then Carolina, does Carolina have 201?
So Carolina has pick number 1 and 39.
Yeah.
So their second round pick is number 39.
Okay, so if they go and trade Dalvin Cook for pick 39, so Carolina now has Dalvin Cook and Bryce Young. I like Bryce Young more with that opportunity. And then Jameer, I like giving him the lion's share there, drafting Hendon Hooker at 23 and Jameer at 39. So I like that. I like that. But other than something like that, I don't like him, won't draft him, and he won't be on my fantasy teams. As simple as that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And, talking about Minnesota, the reason you mentioned that they want a second round pick for Dalvin Cook is because they don't currently have a second round pick. They do not have one, which is why for them to get in this running back conversation, they'd have to go and somehow acquire a second round pick, because the only pick they have, they've got the 23rd overall pick in the first round, and they've got the 87th overall pick currently. So they're kind of in a hurting situation. It's going to be interesting.
They also need a receiver. So Jameer Gibbs with his receiving upside, and then always having to double cover Justin Jefferson.
Yeah.
So, and then again, we said the receiving class is deep. So, I mean, again, you go Xavier Hutchinson in the fifth round, the fourth or fifth round, then Justin Jefferson, you got Jameer Gibbs, who's coming out the backfield. And then you have TJ Hawkinson going up the seam. So, I mean, love that.
Yeah, I think that's smart. I'm just looking here at my big board, and I'm looking at the teams that have multiple third or fourth round picks. And actually, the team with the most fourth round picks is the New England Patriots. So I could see them taking another running back and just killing all of our Ramondre Stevenson joys and happiness.
Yeah, and they would do it too. That's
absolutely.
kind of the tough part. The other thing is, like, you look at like pitfalls, like places you don't want to see guys being drafted to, and I don't want to draft Jordan Addison or Zay Flowers if they end up in Baltimore. Or I also don't love the idea that Jameer Gibbs, so like if Jameer Gibbs goes to Buffalo, I don't like it. I just don't like it.
No.
James Cook, is fine enough, I guess, but now you have two dudes that are the same guy, and they're pointing at each other like the Spider-Man meme.
Isn't this so? I was so high on James Cook last year, and everybody was yelling at me from the rafters and saying, Shane, this guy's 193 pounds. You're going to be disappointed by him. And I said, well, Devin Singletary is like 100 or like 200 pounds. Is it that big of a difference? Devin Singletary still touched him, and James Cook was a massive disappointment last year. Frankly, I think a wasted second round pick by the Buffalo Bills. Jameer Gibbs, he's got 10 pounds on him, but that would just absolutely eviscerate James Cook's value, I think. Because Jameer Gibbs, no matter every way you slice it, is a superior NFL running back than James Cook, in my most humble opinion.
So Charbonnet has been the guy that I think is slowly getting forgotten about, to be honest.
But
I
not
mean,
us. Matt, we've been talking about Zach Charbonnet from the beginning as the projected as our favorite RB2 off the board. And
yep.
and I'm still there. Like that was a hot take a month ago when we were talking about it. And now more and more people are on board with that just because Jahmyr Gibbs loves the talent, but maybe he's going to be typecast into a certain role, in which case he's getting 12 to 15 touches a game, which would be fantastic. But maybe he's only getting 7, 8 carries.
Yeah. So about Charbonnet, the thing about Charbonnet is, and this is why I like, this is why I want third round picks like this. And this is why I want to draft third round for RB, is because I just believe that Charbonnet, because he is decent enough, he's going to be drafted into a situation that I'm not going to fall in love with. But I am going to fall in love with the adverse situational draft spots for later on. So, like the Cowboys don't need to draft RB in round 1. If they get Bijan, then great. I can enjoy it and I can love that. Now, if they go Roschon Johnson in the 3rd round, or if they go Tank Bigsby in the 3rd round, I like that a lot more. And then because it's 3rd round capital, then they're going to be pushed down the list, where Charbonnet ends up in Cincinnati, which could be a great spot in a couple years. It could be a great spot in a couple years, but then doesn't get the opportunity, comes out, gets some opportunity, doesn't capitalize on it. And then boom, now Cincinnati is drafting maybe they'll get the number 1 overall running back next year. It's just so tough to see. And that's the Dameon Pierce corollary, where Dameon Pierce looks good, but because they didn't go and draft high capital on him, and then you're looking at a Kenneth Walker next year in the 1st round, or a Bijan or a Travion Henderson next year, at 25 plus, it's going to be hard to look at Charbonnet, who, yes, you just spent a 2nd, or, let's say it's a 2nd round pick on him. It's tough. And he didn't come out and didn't perform too well because he didn't get a lot of opportunity because he sat behind Mixon. So it's just tough.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess the question is, I mean, the Cincinnati Bengals pick at 28. They're not going to take a running back there. Then they pick again at 60. And I don't know if Zach Charbonnet will fall to 60. Listen, we do know that the NFL is getting smarter, and round 2 is a new round 1, round 3 is a new round 2, right? Like they're waiting more and more. I mean, look, you saw some very productive running backs like Dameon Pierce just last year, Rashad White last year, getting later capital, and they were productive in the NFL, right? So Zach Charbonnet, but a player like Roschon Johnson, who you mentioned, I mean, he's getting a lot more hype. Obviously, he was behind Bijan at Texas, so he doesn't have the production profile that we'd like to see when we're drafting these running backs highly, but he's every bit the profile of a 3-down back, which there's not a lot of those guys in the NFL nowadays. So a player like that going at 60, Cincinnati Bengals have themselves, I think, a bit of a pickle, Matt, with Joe Mixon right now. Like whether or not there's going to be any sort of legal, call it discipline by the NFL because of this. So for those of you who don't know, like Joe Mixon had charges put up against him. They were then dropped. They were then put back up against him, quote, due to more information, new information, right? So maybe, and over and above that, the Cincinnati Bengals have flirted with the idea of straight up cutting Joe Mixon. So if Zach Charbonnet goes there and they cut Joe Mixon, and Zach Charbonnet is the de facto 1 in that offense, man, I love Charbonnet. Even now, just, sight unseen, I love Charbonnet at the end of round 1 in a rookie or rookie drafts, right? Am I crazy?
No, you're not crazy. Like Charbonnet, my thing, if you go and watch his tape, go and watch him and his tape, and then go turn around and go watch AJ Dillon's tape, and you can kind of see why I would rather go get AJ Dillon plus for that 110 and then just get out of there, because AJ Dillon is set up in an opportunity that could actually keep him there long term. They've expressed that they are okay to sign RB to long-term contracts. And even if they don't, AJ Dillon could end up as an extreme hot commodity depending on where he goes in the fantasy community, right now you could probably trade 110 when Charbonnet's on the block, like you're at 110 and he's there and he got good draft capital, and then go and trade it away for AJ Dillon plus. I mean, you could go AJ Dillon and a 2. You might be able to get a 1 next year or something crazy like that if somebody loves Charbonnet. The thing about these running backs in these positions, and I've said this when we first started potting together, is this is the year that these veterans, they're gone. They're gone after this year, okay?
Yeah.
Dalvin Cook, gone. Mixon, gone. I mean, Eckler, probably gone. Josh Jacobs,
Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah, Zeke Elliott. Raheem Mostert, gone.
Yeah.
Derrick Henry is probably gone. James Conner, gone. Like Tony Pollard, maybe last year, gone. Swift, gone. It's like
it's
Montgomery,
big turnover.
Gone.
Yeah.
So
I know this isn't like just a speculation talk, but King Henry being rumored to be traded to the Philadelphia Eagles, that would be pretty wild, no?
Well, it would be more wild to do that than just to select Bijan at 10. So I would rather grab Bijan for 5 years as 10th overall and instead of get Derrick Henry. I mean, that just makes no sense to me. But what would you trade for Derrick Henry? I mean, that's the difference, right?
Third?
Christian McCaffrey. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Christian McCaffrey goes for 2, 3, 4, and that's Christian McCaffrey. So, and if Derrick Henry goes for a third, then what's Dalvin Cook getting? And so it's kind of a really incredible thing this year where you're gonna see a lot of these guys be displaced and then gone. So I would say you need to be offing these guys for second round picks, and these second round picks that you need to be getting, as crappy as it is, you off for a second. Here's the play. Okay. I'm going to tell you here. You heard it here first.
From an NFL perspective or from our fantasy
from
football
a dynasty fantasy football perspective.
Okay.
Instead of drafting Charbonnet at 110, okay, you off Charbonnet 110, and let's say you got Mixon. Okay. You off Mixon as a throw-in. You off, some of these guys that I just mentioned as a throw-in, plus 110. You go out there, you get AJ Dillon, and you go and you get like 2-8, 3-2, 3-6 or something like that, right? So now you just kind of amass 4 players for 2, and the 4 that you're looking at have upside, could take over offenses, and can turn around guys like Pacheco. And then even so, I mean, you get to 2.6, the pick you got, and you off Jalen Hyatt, who could be Jalen Hyatt. You off that, you get another couple guys or whatever. And that's really the play to go for here, because you got Chase Brown, you got Abanikanda, Kendre Miller, Tajay Spears, Roshan Johnson, and you want all these guys, because these are the guys that are going to get 3rd or 4th round draft capital. They're going to be put into better situations than you're going to have Jahmyr Gibbs in Buffalo, which they could just cannibalize each other for 5 years
James
straight.
Cook,
You know what I mean? And then maybe guys will draft and still play Mixon for a year or 2. I mean, who knows what could happen there, but that's the play, Shane. You heard it here first.
Yeah. So I think the takeaway from that comment, Matt, is basically the guys like the Tajay Spears, the Kendre Millers, Izzy Abanikandas, like those guys are going to be going in probably early to mid round 2 of your fantasy drafts. And when you're talking about just taking lottery ticket scratches, right? Like high probability, okay, it's like one of those, home lotto ones, right? Where it's like, okay, we're going to give you some good prizes here, better odds than your just straight up scratch lottery. Maybe that's worth selling your 110, getting a tangible veteran in addition to a couple second round picks, because people like the shiny new toy. The number one key thing to your strategy here, Matt, though, is don't sell that pick until you're on the clock. Make sure you're on the clock when somebody's just salivating at Zach Charbonnet or Jahmyr Gibbs sitting there who fell at the 110 because he went to Buffalo. That's when you sell that pick. That's when you get maximum value for that pick. Okay, Matt, we're at 55 minutes here. I'm going to give you one last shot. Is there any player that we haven't talked about that you want to talk about? Wide receiver, quarterback, running back, tight end position?
Here's the other
There you go.
yes, Chardonnay, now I want wine. Yes, I love
There we
that
go.
idea. Yeah, so again, we seem to do this a lot. We talk about a lot of the guys and then we freaking leave the tight ends out of the play. You're
Yeah.
the absolute best you could get this class to work for you is to be a team that has Hawkinson and like 110
Yep.
with an older RB sitting on your roster, like a
Mm-hmm.
Mixon, any one of those guys, Swift even.
Mm-hmm.
A Swift 110, and you have like a Hawkinson, so you don't need a tight end. You can trade back and then trade back again with somebody who needs a tight end, wants to trade up. But the tight ends, I don't want to forget about here. In tight end premium leagues, you have 7 tight ends that I think could easily be amazing for you, and wait to see where they fall. Luke Musgrave is the most.
He's a stud.
He's a stud, but he didn't play incredible. He had an injury, so he doesn't have the numbers that back up a lot of this data. If you're a data driven drafter, you're not going to be able to draft Luke Musgrave because all the data points without the production kind of fall down. But 6'6", 253, extremely athletic, four-sport state champion, and is the most Travis Kelce guy as far as he's a barreling, athletic, will be in the right space all the time. He is a receiving tight end. He's not going to be kept in line to block at all. So when you draft him, you have to be okay with where he's going to go. The New Orleans Saints seem to be an amazing landing spot for a tight end, although they have a veteran, which is great. Derek Carr loves to play his tight ends. He has a small PP arm, can't get the ball extremely downfield, so he wants to get it across. Luke Musgrave to the Saints. Dalton Kincaid, a lot of people have this extreme talk that he's going to go to Washington. I think that talk is there because he, I think
medically cleared.
I think they want to force Green Bay at 15 to select him. Yeah. So I think that's why a lot of that. I think it's just gamesmanship. Michael Mayer seems to be getting forgotten about. He is Gronkowski. And then Darnell Washington is 6'7", 264. You got guys like Will Mallory, Sam Laporta, who are great. Kuntz is the most athletic guy, or was it Kuntz or Kraft? I can't remember. Double K.
Yeah, Kraft, yeah.
Kraft. These guys are athletically amazing. You saw Daniel Bellinger with opportunity last year, and Daniel Bellinger was a guy I loved coming in, who went second round, I believe, early third round. So tight ends. And then another thing that I'd like to say, the last thing I would like to say is I think that CJ Stroud is the biggest enigma in this draft. So on a lot of most recent mocks, what you're getting with these mocks right now are these final mocks. So they're holding these guys to the flames and they're saying, okay, give me exactly what you think is going to happen. And everybody seems, with all of the talk and everything that's happening, all of the talk is about how at 2 and 3, they're going to be 2 defensive players. Yep. So you're going to go Bryce Young at 1, and then you have Indy at 4 and Seattle at 5. And I think what happened, and I'll put my hand on the Bible to this, okay? I think CJ Stroud intentionally tanked his value. Ooh. I think he's playing the game. I think he's smarter than the testing, but I think he knew if you go and look at a picture. So the Seahawks brought in every draft prospect, okay, and they took a picture with them. You could tell Bryce Young could give a shit about being there. Will Levis is just happy to be where he is. But CJ Stroud, I promise you, I think CJ Stroud and the Seahawks had such an amazing meeting that CJ left there saying, what do I have to do to get behind a DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Kenneth Walker led offense with the opportunity for them to be in a position to go get Jackson Smith and Jigba, who they need, or worst case scenario, they end up with a Jordan Addison as their third wide receiver. That's a situation I think CJ Stroud with a Pete Carroll, who's a college-minded coach, I think that's everything CJ Stroud wanted, and I think that he intentionally tanked his draft value to go 5 to the Seattle Seahawks. That's what I want.
I love it. So, Matt, my question for you, this is the closer question. When Pete Carroll selects CJ Stroud at 5 overall, will he be wearing his shirt or will he not be wearing his shirt?
I don't know. I mean,
that's going to rhetorical. I'll leave that one with you. So, okay. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. We're going to end it there, Matt, because there's so much to talk about. Listen, we're going to be back next week. We got finally Mike Dickinson, the prodigal son, is going to be back next week on next Saturday. Matt, you're welcome to join if you want to come jump on following rounds 1 and 2 and 3, days 1 and 2, I should say, to talk a little NFL draft. I'll hit you up there. If you want more fantasy football content, our leader, our general, our chief, Kevin the Geek Allen, was over at the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast talking with our old guy, Alan Seslowski. They were talking a little bit of dynasty strategy. So go hit him up over at the RotoWire Podcast if you want a little bit more fantasy football content from the DFS Army perspective. Of course, go check out dfsarmy.com. All of our content is there. Become a VIP member. Hit up the Discord. Man, there's just so much content out there. If you are into DFS sports, we have cheat sheets, we have content for you. So go check it out, dfsarmy.com. And hey, listen, if you like what you listened to today, just help us out. Comment on the podcast, comment on the video, give us a like, give us a follow. We're just trying to grow this little program we like to call the DFS Army Fantasy Football Show, but we're going to be here with you. We're just getting started, Matt. Enjoy the draft next week. For Flex Matt, I'm Flex Shane, and we are the DFS Army Fantasy Football Show. Let's go!
Sheesh. Yeah, big time. Knowing that.